Every time a massive storm hits, the same word floods the comments: HAARP. Was this engineered? Is someone manipulating the weather? It's a serious accusation. A machine in Alaska, controlling hurricanes, steering winter storms, triggering disasters. But is that physically possible, or are we underestimating the true power of the atmosphere itself? Today, we're breaking down what HAARP actually is, what it can do, and what the science really says. Because this facility, this real, government-funded, scientifically documented research station, has become one of the most misunderstood places on Earth. And understanding the difference between what it is and what people believe it to be matters. Not because those asking questions are wrong to ask them, but because the truth here is genuinely fascinating, and in some ways even stranger than the theories. Let's start with the basics. HAARP stands for the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. It is a research facility located near Gakona, Alaska, a remote region chosen deliberately for its position at high latitude, close to the polar ionosphere. Construction began in the early 1990s. It was initially funded and developed jointly by the United States Air Force, the United States Navy, and DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. That funding origin, as we'll discuss later, is part of why the facility attracted so much suspicion. The station was transferred to the University of Alaska Fairbanks in 2015, and it now operates primarily as an open scientific research program. Members of the public can attend open houses. The data it collects is published. Its purpose is not classified. So what does it actually do? HAARP studies the ionosphere. That is the uppermost layer of Earth's atmosphere, beginning roughly 60 kilometers above the surface and extending up to about 1,000 kilometers. The ionosphere is a region where solar radiation ionizes atmospheric gases, meaning it strips electrons from atoms, creating a layer of electrically charged particles. This layer matters enormously. It reflects certain radio frequencies back toward Earth, which is how long-distance radio communication works. It also interacts with the Earth's magnetic field in complex ways. Understanding it has real scientific and practical value for communication systems, GPS accuracy, and space weather prediction. HAARP's primary instrument is something called an ionospheric research instrument, a phased array of 180 high-frequency antennas spread across approximately 33 acres of land. Together, these antennas transmit radio waves upward into the ionosphere at frequencies between 2.7 and 10 megahertz, with a maximum output of 3.6 megawatts. This process is called ionospheric heating. The radio energy causes electrons in the ionosphere to accelerate, which creates a small, temporary, and localized disturbance in that charged layer. Scientists then measure how the ionosphere responds. That is it. That is the mechanism. Radio energy directed upward into a layer of the atmosphere that begins 60 kilometers above your head. What HAARP cannot do is transmit energy downward into the lower atmosphere, the region where weather actually happens. The troposphere, where clouds form, where storms develop, where precipitation falls, is entirely below the range of HAARP's influence. Despite this, a consistent set of claims has circulated online for decades. They are worth stating clearly, without dismissal, because they represent what a significant number of people genuinely believe. The claims include that HAARP can generate and steer hurricanes, that it can trigger or amplify earthquakes, that it can be used to create droughts or floods in targeted regions, that it has the ability to manipulate the jet stream, and that it serves as a covert weapons program disguised as science. These claims are specific. They imply a level of atmospheric control that would represent, if true, the most consequential technological capability in human history. So the appropriate question is not whether it is reasonable to be skeptical of government programs. It often is. The appropriate question is, do the physics support these claims? Here's where we need to be precise, because the scale involved is not a minor detail. It is the entire argument. HAARP's maximum power output is 3.6 megawatts. That is roughly equivalent to the output of a small regional power station, or the electricity consumed by a mid-sized town. A mature Atlantic hurricane releases energy at a rate of approximately 5 to 20 exajoules per day. An exajoule is 1 quintillion joules, a 1 followed by 18 zeros. To put that in perspective, the energy released by a single hurricane in a single day is roughly 10,000 times greater than the total annual electricity consumption of a country the size of the Netherlands. HAARP's total power output, running continuously for an entire year, would not meaningfully contribute to a single hour of a Category 3 hurricane's energy budget. This is not a close call. This is not a marginal gap. It is a difference of many orders of magnitude. The atmosphere, driven by solar energy, ocean heat, and planetary rotation, operates at a scale that is simply not comparable to anything a ground-based antenna array can produce. Beyond the energy gap, there is a directional problem. HAARP transmits radio energy upward into the ionosphere. Weather forms in the troposphere, the lowest 12 kilometers of the atmosphere. These are separate systems with no direct physical mechanism connecting a localized ionospheric disturbance to surface storm behavior. Peer-reviewed atmospheric science has found no pathway by which HAARP-type ionospheric heating could initiate, amplify, or redirect a storm system. This is not a matter of scientific consensus being manipulated. It is a matter of thermodynamics, fluid dynamics, and basic physics. A useful analogy. Imagine trying to redirect a river using a hairdryer. Not because the hairdryer is not real or does not produce heat, but because the scale of the problem is categorically different from the tool being proposed. That said, weather modification is not a fantasy. It is a real field of applied science, with real limits. Cloud seeding has been practiced since the 1940s. It involves dispersing substances such as silver iodide or liquid propane into existing cloud formations to encourage ice crystal formation, which can increase precipitation. Countries including China, the United Arab Emirates, and the United States use cloud seeding programs routinely. But cloud seeding is not weather control in the way most people imagine it. It requires pre-existing cloud cover to work. It cannot create rain from a clear sky. It cannot conjure a storm. And its effects, while measurable in certain conditions, are modest. Typically a 10 to 15% increase in precipitation under optimal circumstances. As for steering a hurricane, a storm system that can span hundreds of kilometers, carry hundreds of millions of tons of water vapor, and sustain wind speeds exceeding 250 kilometers per hour, no current technology, no matter how sophisticated, approaches that capability. The atmospheric energy scales involved are simply beyond what engineering has achieved or is close to achieving. Understanding why HAARP became the focus of so much suspicion requires acknowledging some legitimate historical context. When HAARP was established in the early 1990s, the Cold War had just ended. Public trust in government institutions, particularly military programs, was historically low. The facility was funded by the Air Force, the Navy, and DARPA, agencies not traditionally associated with transparent science communication. In its early years, information about HAARP's purpose was not widely publicized. For people watching a new, remote, military-funded antenna facility appear in Alaska during a period of institutional skepticism, questions were understandable. Then came the internet. The mid-1990s and the early 2000s saw the emergence of online communities where alternative theories about HAARP spread rapidly. A 1995 book titled "Angels Don't Play This HAARP" became widely circulated in conspiratorial circles and introduced many of the specific claims that persist today. The facility became a symbol, a focal point for broader anxieties about government secrecy, technology, and environmental catastrophe. And then, every time an extreme weather event occurred, whether a major hurricane, a severe winter storm, or a prolonged drought, HAARP was named in the aftermath. The pattern became self-reinforcing. The facility's real existence gave the claims a tangible anchor. Its remote location and initial secrecy gave them texture. This is not a phenomenon unique to HAARP. Throughout history, large-scale disasters have prompted searches for human causes, for someone or something responsible. It is a deeply human response to chaos. When destruction appears on a scale that feels unnatural, the instinct to find agency behind it is powerful. Here is what we know. HAARP is a real research facility. It does interact with the ionosphere. Its early history involved military funding and limited public communication. These are facts, and they are worth knowing. Based on physics, based on energy constraints, and based on the documented science of atmospheric systems, what HAARP cannot do is control hurricanes, trigger earthquakes, or manipulate weather at scale. The atmosphere is not a passive system waiting to be steered by a ground-based transmitter. It is one of the most powerful, complex, and energetic systems on Earth. It is driven by forces, solar radiation, ocean temperatures, and planetary rotation that operate on scales we can measure and model but cannot replicate. Extreme weather is increasing in frequency and intensity. That is documented. It is the result of well-understood changes in ocean heat content and atmospheric energy, driven by decades of greenhouse gas accumulation. That explanation may feel less satisfying than a single controllable cause, but it is where the evidence points. Understanding the actual science of severe weather, how hurricanes form, why they intensify, where they track, and how a warming planet changes those dynamics gives us something more valuable than a theory. It gives us an accurate picture of what we are actually facing. Critical thinking means following evidence where it leads, even when the destination is more complicated than we hoped. It means asking hard questions of powerful institutions, while also being willing to accept answers that do not confirm what we already believe. Both things can be true at once. If you want more evidence-based breakdowns of extreme weather, what causes it, how scientists study it, and what the atmosphere is actually doing, subscribe to Extreme Weather Lab. The science of weather is stranger and more powerful than any theory. It deserves to be understood on its own terms.